Although I suppose if you're looking for a more fitting analogy or PSA from me, media preservation is definitely one of them. And actually, fire safety is interlinked with that as well. If you happen to be a fan of Wallace and Gromit, you may remember that in 2005 there was a dreadful, dreadful warehouse fire that happened to Aardman Animations. It happened to be where they stored all their Morph models, original Wallace and Gromit models, anything that was pre-Were-Rabbit or like Chicken Run, they would have stored in that warehouse. Unfortunately, the warehouse was a Victorian place which had not been renovated, it had no sprinkler system, so most of the Wallace and Gromit models from pre-Were-Rabbit no longer exist. You could say they were lost media, but it was dreadful because this happened to be a few days after Were-Rabbit's like premiere date. So they were supposed to be celebrating their latest film, only to realize that all their history was basically wiped out in smoke. This isn't the only example of stop motion and media preservation and how they are very vulnerable materials to be made out of. There's also the case of Moral Oral, the adult stop motion animated show, which also used stop motion, but the creator wasn't given access to the models once they were done with them. They were like burned or something. I read about it on Reddit. I don't have the full details, but it was something like that. And of course, moi, the fella I happen to be dressed as today. What you may not know is that a lot of the Sam models have either been auctioned off or they're not readily available. There's some bloke who works on Thomas the Tank Engine who owns the original Sam model, but I've heard that he's not good at preserving models, unfortunately. A lot of the like houses and props, they were auctioned off for like £1,000 or so, compared to Bob the Builder and Postman Pat, who have like museum-like displays. Sam doesn't really have that. Because unfortunately, as flexible as stop motion may be to animate, when it comes to like the safety aspects of it, it's quite vulnerable. It can disintegrate, it relies on like being stored in the right place, and when that's not done, well, it just disintegrates. They're like dolls, essentially. So, like how the 1960s Barbie dolls, like their ears will turn green if they've been wearing their earrings for too long because of the material that it's made out of. So, like, stop motion models are basically the same. It is dreadful and awful because people deserve to be able to see museums of these models that brought these shows and films to life. But when they're not preserved, how can you see that? Like, sure, you can watch the movies and the shows that made them, you could maybe make your own, but that's not the same as having the physical copies of the props that were originally used in your hands. And on the topic of my old friend Bob the Builder, he was actually stolen from his museum exhibit. I don't know why, but it was somewhere in like Wayside or somewhere in Manchester. The original Bob the Builder model used to be on display. Someone stole him. Bro, my guy, my fella, why would you do that? I mean, I get why people want to steal, like, movies or shows or whatever, because, well, not everything is readily available on DVD or VHS. But a model from Bob the Builder? What are you thinking? What were you thinking? Yeah. So yeah, it turns out that stop motion, it's a good animation technique, but it's vulnerable when it's not preserved in the right way. There are some examples of stop motion being preserved in positive ways, such as the Rudolph the Red-Nosed Reindeer models. They're up for display in some museums in America, and they're well preserved. But unfortunately, the UK ones are not. And unfortunately, there's many other horror stories of that, such as in the 60s and 70s, there were the Trumpton models from, oh, what was his name? I can't remember the guy's name, but he worked on Chamberwick Green, which some of you who would have grown up in like the 70s or 60s might remember. I'm pretty sure that guy did try to burn his models. I think he either burned them or he got rid of them. He just didn't see why he would need to use them outside of filming. Which, I mean, fair, but like, wouldn't you want to look at what you used to make them? You know? Like, it would look nice in a museum. Why destroy it like that? That's so stupid. Yeah.